The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the living room in warm, golden light. Emma sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Despite the calm of the morning, her mind was restless. She couldn't stop thinking about Claire the way she had laughed in the rain yesterday. The vulnerability in her eyes, the unspoken words that had hovered between them like a delicate thread. Claire appeared in the doorway, carrying a small vase of wildflowers she had picked from the garden. She paused, noticing Emma's pensive expression. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of warmth and hesitation. "I thought these might brighten your table." Emma smiled, taking the vase from her. "They're beautiful." "Thank you, Claire." Her eyes met Claire's, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was a tension in the air, one that was not uncomfortable but charged with quiet anticipation, like the pause before a long-awaited melody begins. Claire stepped closer, placing the vase carefully on the table. She leaned slightly, as if trying to find the right words. "Emma, I need to say something," she murmured, her voice trembling just enough to reveal the depth of her feelings. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, though she hadn't known exactly how it would arrive. "You can say it," she whispered, her voice steady despite the rush of emotion she felt. Claire took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on Emma's eyes. "I've been holding back for too long," she began. "All these years I've tried to ignore the way I feel, the way I've always felt about you. But seeing you yesterday, sharing these moments, it made me realize I can't stay silent anymore." Emma's chest tightened. Every word was a pulse of emotion, a ripple that reached the corners of her heart. She leaned forward slightly, encouraging Claire without a word, letting her know that she was listening. Fully and completely. Claire swallowed, her hands clasping together nervously. "Emma, I care about you more than I probably should have. More than I've allowed myself to admit. And I think I've always cared, even when I didn't know how to say it." Tears pricked at Emma's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of recognition. Every stolen glance, every quiet moment of shared laughter, every memory from the past, they all made sense now. The bond they had carried silently for years had been real, strong, and enduring. "I've felt the same," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "I've felt it for so long, but I was afraid too, afraid of saying something that might change everything, afraid of losing what we already had." Claire's eyes softened, and a faint smile appeared, the kind that speaks of relief, hope, and joy all at once. "So we've both been waiting," she said, almost in wonder. "Waiting for the right moment or the courage to speak." Emma nodded. "Yes, waiting for a moment like this, and I think maybe it's here now." The room seemed to hold its breath, the sunlight dancing on the walls, the air filled with quiet anticipation. In that moment, they didn't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. The truth had been spoken, and that alone was enough. The unspoken bond that had lingered for years had finally been acknowledged. And it felt like the first step towards something extraordinary. Claire reached out slowly, placing her hand over Emma's. The touch was gentle, careful, but it carried a weight of emotion that words could not express. Emma felt her heart swell, a rush of warmth spreading through her chest. It was not fleeting desire, it was deep, abiding care, the kind of love that grows quietly, steadily, like sunlight warming the earth. "I've never been able to tell you before," Claire admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how. I was afraid of ruining our friendship, of changing what we had. But I can't pretend anymore. I need you to know how much you mean to me." Emma squeezed Claire's hand gently. "No, and I feel the same. I've always known in my heart, even when I didn't dare to say it. You've always mattered to me, more than anyone." They sat together in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their shared truth settle. It was not loud, not flashy, not dramatic in the conventional sense, but it was profound. The turning point had arrived, not through an event or an accident, but through courage, honesty. and the willingness to finally speak the truth that had been carried silently for so long. Claire smiled, a mixture of relief and joy radiating from her. "So, where do we go from here?" she asked. Though she didn't need an immediate answer, Emma returned a smile, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't realized she'd been missing. "One step at a time," she said softly. "We start here with honesty, with understanding, and we see where it leads." Outside, the sunlight shifted, casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in a long time, both Emma and Claire felt a sense of clarity, a quiet assurance that the bond they had shared for years could finally grow into something beautiful, intentional, and enduring. And in that gentle moment, surrounded by the soft light and the quiet stillness of the house, they understood that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with the simple courage to speak the truth finally, openly, and from the heart. The evening settled softly over the small town, painting the sky in gentle shades of pink and lavender. Inside the house, Emma and Claire sat side by side on the living room couch, the quiet hum of the clock and the occasional chirp of evening birds filling the space between them. For the first time in years, there was no hesitation, no unspoken longing, no quiet restraint. Everything they had carried in their hearts, memories, admiration, and unspoken feelings had found its place in words, gestures, and quiet acknowledgement. Claire reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from Emma's face. "I never thought it would feel this." "Easy," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the lamp beside them. "Like all those years of waiting were meant to prepare us for this moment." Emma smiled, feeling a gentle swell in her chest. "I think they were," she replied. "All those stolen glances, quiet conversations, little memories, they weren't wasted. They were building something we just hadn't seen until now." Claire nodded, her gaze turning thoughtful. "Strange, isn't it? How life can take its time, and yet somehow the important things always find their way back to you." Emma felt a lump in her throat at the honesty in Claire's words. It was a truth she had learned to carry quietly. Life did move unpredictably, but the people who mattered most often returned in moments when you least expected, bringing with them clarity, hope, and a gentle kind of joy. They spent the next hour reminiscing about their shared past, laughing softly at small misadventures, and reflecting on the moments that had shaped them both. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as though the years of silence had been only a prelude to the richness of the present. Each story, each memory, strengthened the bond between them, filling the space with warmth and familiarity. Later, they moved to the porch, wrapped in cozy blankets against the evening chill. The garden glimmered faintly under the light of the setting sun, the flowers still carrying the scent of the morning rain. Emma picked up a small stone from the pathway and turned it over in her hand, smiling faintly. "Do you remember," she asked, "the day we built that fort in the living room?" Claire laughed, the sound soft and melodic. "Yes, you insisted it had to have a window so the outside world could see in. And I'm pretty sure we got half the cushions stuck in the doorway." Emma laughed too, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I think that was the first time I realized how much I like spending time with you. Not just your presence, but everything about you. Even then, it felt important." Claire's expression softened, her eyes glistening slightly. "I felt the same," she admitted, "and I think I've carried that feeling with me all these years, even when I didn't fully understand it." The evening deepened, and with the sky now darkening into a peaceful indigo, they sat in a comfortable silence. It was not awkward or empty, it was full of understanding, trust, and the quiet reassurance that they were finally fully present for one another. Emma turned to Claire, her voice gentle. "I think what we have now, it's rare. The kind of bond that doesn't need labels or grand gestures. Just honesty, patience, and care." Claire nodded, her hand reaching for Emma's again. "Yes, and that's enough. It's everything we've ever wanted in its own quiet way." For the first time in a long while, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. It was not a loud, dramatic happiness. It was steady, comforting, and deeply rooted. The weight of years spent wondering, waiting, and hesitating had lifted, leaving only the warmth of shared hearts and mutual understanding as the stars began to appear one by one in the sky. Claire leaned back, resting her head lightly against the couch. "I never thought I'd find this," she murmured. "This quiet, gentle kind of love. But now that I have, I don't ever want to let it go." Emma smiled, her own heart echoing the sentiment. "Neither do I. And maybe that's the lesson we've learned, that sometimes love doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be there, patiently, faithfully, until the moment is right." They sat together as night fully embraced the town, the world outside slowing to a soft hush. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, only the simple, profound knowledge that they had found one another again. The past, with all its memories, mistakes, and unspoken words, had led them here toward a connection that was Hone's. The house had grown quieter as afternoon slid into evening. Alex was still sitting beside Claire, who now rested more comfortably on the couch, her breathing steady and calm. The faint sound of the wind outside mingled with the soft ticking of the wall clock, making the room feel suspended in time. Alex ran a hand over his face, trying to shake off the nervous energy that had been building since morning. It wasn't just worry anymore. It was something deeper, realization that the bond he had always felt with Claire, subtle and quiet as it had been, was alive and pulsing stronger than ever. Then, almost as if fate had decided to intervene, a small, ordinary event shifted everything. Claire reached for a small box on the nearby shelf, a box Alex had seen dozens of times, but had never paid much attention to. "What's this?" he asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Claire held it gently, her fingers tracing the edges as if the memories inside were fragile. "It's old letters," she said softly. "Letters from my sister and my parents. Things I kept when I moved here. I never thought I'd go through them again." Something about her voice, quiet and reflective, made Alex's chest tighten. He had always admired Claire's thoughtfulness, her ability to hold on to small fragments of her past, and now it felt like he was being given a glimpse into the heart of who she was. "May I?" he asked gently. Claire nodded, and he moved closer, keeping his distance respectful. Together, they opened the box. Inside were letters, photographs, and small mementos of moments from her past life. One photograph in particular caught Alex's eye. Claire, smiling under a summer sun, her eyes full of hope and quiet joy. "She looks so happy," Alex murmured, more to himself than to her. Claire glanced at the photo and smiled faintly, a wistful expression crossing her face. "I was happy, but it was a different time. I had hopes, dreams, but life had its way of changing everything." Alex felt a pang of empathy. He had his own regrets, his own moments of longing for things left unsaid or opportunities missed. And now, seeing her like this, vulnerable, reflective, he realized how deeply their emotional worlds were connected. "I think we've both carried so much without really talking about it," he said softly. "Maybe that's why moments like this feel important." Claire's eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. There was no need for words. The shared understanding was enough. They had spent years side by side. Yet moments like this, quiet, unplanned, deeply personal, had the power to bring them closer than any conversation ever could. A sudden knock at the door interrupted the silence. Alex rose to answer, but Claire waved him back. "I'll get it," she said, her voice weak but determined. He watched as she struggled slightly, then adjusted her posture to answer. It was only the mailman, handing over a small package. But something about the way Claire handled it, her careful movements, the faint smile that flickered across her lips, reminded Alex of all the little ways she navigated life with grace, even when she wasn't at her best. As she closed the door and returned to the couch, he noticed how the soft light from the window made her hair glow, framing her face in a gentle halo. His heart thumped not with anything inappropriate, but with an intense, protective affection, a desire to be near her and ensure she was safe and cared for. "Thank you for staying with me today," Claire said, her voice soft. "I know it must have been. A lot." Alex shook his head, smiling faintly. "It wasn't. I wanted to. I like being here for you." His words hung in the air, simple but weighted with honesty. Claire looked down, her fingers twisting slightly in her lap. I know, and I appreciate it more than I can say." There was a moment of silence, filled with the soft hum of life continuing outside the windows. And in that silence, Alex realized something crucial. The present had a way of reshaping the past, of giving second chances, even if unspoken. He thought about all the times he had watched her from afar, admired her strength, felt a quiet longing that he had never acted upon. And now, with her sitting there, vulnerable yet dignified, reflecting on her past, he felt the same emotions, stronger and more immediate. The bond they had always shared was no longer just history, it was alive, growing, and waiting for acknowledgement. Alex reached for a blanket on the side table and draped it gently over Claire's shoulders. She leaned slightly into him, a gesture of trust and comfort. It was innocent, simple, yet filled with meaning. That small act, a blanket in a quiet room, carried the weight of years of care, concern, an unspoken emotion. For the first time in a long while, Alex allowed himself to fully feel the depth of his connection with her. It wasn't romantic in a flashy or dramatic sense. It was quiet, powerful, and sincere, a love built on years of trust, shared memories, and quiet understanding. And as they sat together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Alex knew that something subtle but undeniable had shifted. The past had laid the foundation, the present had sparked a new awareness, and the future, well, the future held possibilities neither of them had dared to imagine before. Evening had fallen, and the house was cloaked in soft shadows. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards, and the gentle rustle of curtains in the breeze filled the otherwise still room. Alex and Claire sat together on the couch, the blanket still resting lightly over her shoulders. Outside, the last traces of sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and lavender. Alex stared at the muted colors on the horizon, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had been reflecting on the day, on the small, tender moments that had shifted something within him. The way Claire had handled the letters, the gentle way she accepted his care. These simple things had reignited feelings he had kept hidden for so long. Feelings that were never wrong, never inappropriate, but had remained unspoken because life and circumstance had always kept them in check. Claire shifted slightly, sensing his quiet presence. She hadn't said much since their earlier moments of connection, but she didn't need to. She felt it, the same pull, the same longing. She had known Alex for years, watched him grow into a capable, thoughtful young man, and yet today had reminded her of something deeper. How much she valued his presence, how much she needed it, and how much she had always quietly admired him. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, letting the silence stretch, letting the unspoken words linger in the space between them. It was a silence filled with tension, warmth, and a delicate understanding that some emotions, though deeply felt, were too complicated to voice at once. Finally, Alex broke the silence, his voice soft. "Claire, I've always felt close to you. Maybe more than I should have, but it's never changed how much I respect you. I think I've been afraid to say it out loud." Claire's eyes met his, a flicker of surprise and recognition crossing her features. She swallowed, a gentle catch in her throat. "Alex, I think I know what you mean. I felt it too. For a long time, maybe. Longer than I should admit." The admission hung between them, fragile yet powerful. For years they had shared smiles, laughter, quiet support, and small acts of care that never demanded recognition, yet had spoken volumes. And now, in the soft glow of the evening, their mutual feelings were finally acknowledged. Though still clothed in hesitancy and restraint, Alex felt a flutter of emotion. He hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: relief, longing, and a quiet thrill. But he also felt a deep respect for Claire, for the trust they had built, for the unspoken boundaries that had guided them. "I don't want to rush anything," he said gently. "I just wanted you to know how I feel. Even if we don't act on it right away." Claire nodded, a small, serene smile touching her lips. "I appreciate that, Alex. I feel the same way. But it's complicated, isn't it? We've shared so much, yet life has always kept us careful. I've had to remind myself that feelings don't always need to change the way we live. At least, not immediately." The conversation, though careful, opened something tender between them. Both of them had carried this quiet longing for years, his admiration for her warmth and strength, her appreciation for his thoughtfulness and steadfast presence. Now, they shared a space where these feelings could exist openly, even without immediate action. Alex reached out, lightly touching her hand over the blanket. The contact was simple, respectful, but it sent a wave of warmth through both of them. Claire's fingers lingered briefly against his, a gesture that spoke of trust, connection, and unspoken understanding. No words were necessary. The moment itself said everything. They sat together, the evening stretching quietly around them, each lost in thought yet acutely aware of the other's presence. Alex thought about all the times he had admired Claire silently, her small acts of kindness, the way she noticed things others didn't, her unwavering calm in moments of difficulty. And Claire thought about Alex's quiet devotion, his patience, and the warmth that had always accompanied his care. Neither had acted on these feelings before, not because they were wrong, but because life had always seemed to demand caution. Now, the words had been spoken, the acknowledgement made, and yet the feelings were left delicately balanced between them, present, intense and respectful, for the first time in a long while. Both felt free to simply exist in the space between friendship and something more. There was longing, yes, but also patience. Hesitation, yes, but also hope. The unspoken truth that had always hovered quietly in there. The rain began gently at first, a soft patter against the windows. Then grew into a steady rhythm that filled the quiet house with a soothing, almost musical sound. Alex and Claire sat together in the living room, the blanket still draped across her shoulders, though now the storm outside made the warmth inside feel even more comforting. Claire was holding a cup of tea, her fingers wrapped around it as though it were an anchor to the world outside. Alex watched her quietly, noticing the small way she fidgeted with the handle, the way her gaze drifted toward the window as though the storm had stirred. More than just the weather, he had been keeping his thoughts carefully measured, respecting the boundaries they had always shared, but something in the steady fall of rain, the intimacy of the moment, made it impossible to stay silent. The feelings he had kept hidden for years, the admiration, the longing, the quiet affection were pressing to be acknowledged. "Claire," he began, voice low but steady, "there's something I need to say. I've tried to keep it inside, because I didn't want to risk what we have, but I can't anymore." Claire looked up, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Alex, what is it?" she asked softly, her voice almost blending with the patter of rain. He took a deep breath, his hands tightening slightly in his lap before he relaxed again. I care about you more than I've ever let myself admit. Not just because you're my stepmom or because I want to be helpful. I care for you deeply. I've felt it for years, but I never knew how to say it or if I should." Claire's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of emotion crossing her face. She set her cup down carefully, as though the weight of his words had pulled her attention fully into the room. "Alex, I had no idea you felt that way," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. He shook his head, a gentle smile forming despite the intensity of the moment. "I didn't act on it because I didn't want to make things complicated or make you uncomfortable. I only wanted to be here for you always." Claire reached out, her hand brushing lightly against his. The touch was simple, respectful, but it carried the full weight of years of unspoken feelings. "Alex," she said softly, "you have been here for me always. Even when I didn't realize I needed someone, you were. And I felt something too. I've felt it for a long time, but I didn't know how to say it, or if it was even allowed." Alex's chest tightened. He had hoped in the quiet corners of his mind that she felt the same, but hearing it aloud from her lips brought an intense wave of emotion, relief, joy, and the kind of longing that finally had permission to exist. The storm outside grew louder, but inside the room, a different kind of intensity filled the space. They didn't rush forward. They didn't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Their connection had always been quiet, built on trust, care, and shared moments. But now, the emotional tension they had carried for years had found release. "I think we've been carrying this for too long," Claire said, her eyes glistening. "And I don't want to hide it anymore. I I care about you too, Alex, more than I can explain." Alex felt a gentle swell of emotion rise in his chest. He reached out, lightly taking her hand in both of his, careful and deliberate. "Then we'll take it one step at a time," he said. "We don't need to rush. We just need to be honest with each other. That's what matters." Claire nodded, a small, grateful smile forming. "Yes, honesty. And patience. That's all I need right now." They sat together in silence, the rain falling steadily outside, their hands intertwined. In that quiet moment, they didn't need to speak further. Every glance, every small gesture, every gentle squeeze of the hand spoke volumes. Years of hidden feelings, hesitation, and longing had finally reached a point where they could exist openly. Without fear or embarrassment, Alex thought about all the times he had watched over her, cared for her in moments of weakness, and supported her quietly. And now the care had transformed into acknowledgement, into a shared emotional truth. For Claire, it was the first time she allowed herself to see the depth of his feelings without fear. "Alex," she said softly after a long pause, "thank you for being honest, for being you. I think I've been waiting for this without even realizing it." Alex smiled, feeling the tension lift, replaced with a warmth that spread through him like sunlight after a storm. "And I'll continue to be here," he said, his voice steady. "For you, for us, always." Outside, the rain began to fade, leaving behind a gentle drizzle. Inside, the emotional storm had settled too, replaced with clarity, trust, and the quiet knowledge that they had crossed an invisible line from unspoken longing to heartfelt truth. It was not a dramatic confession in the way stories often show, but something more real, more enduring, a recognition that feelings once expressed could finally be shared with honesty and care. For Alex and Claire, that evening would mark a turning point, a moment where their connection, built over years of shared experience and quiet affection, had finally been acknowledged. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time they faced it together, with open hearts, mutual respect, and the kind of understanding that only grows from years of trust and love. And in that quiet, rain-soaked room, surrounded by shadows and soft light, they both understood something profound, that love, when nurtured carefully and spoken honestly, could be both safe and transformative, capable of deepening bonds that had always existed beneath the surface. The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room. The house felt lighter somehow, as if the tension of yesterday had lifted, leaving space for calm, hope, and quiet contentment. Alex was sitting in the armchair, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the soft light dance across the walls. Claire entered from the kitchen, carrying a small tray with breakfast. She moved carefully, but there was a spring in her step, a sense of renewed energy, a subtle brightness in her eyes. When she noticed Alex, she smiled, a soft, genuine expression that seemed to reach into the corners of the room and lift the shadows. "Morning," she said softly, setting the tray down on the table. "Morning," Alex replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the air between them quiet but full of meaning. The events of the past, Declare's sudden illness, the storm of emotions, the long-suppressed feelings that had finally found their voice, it shifted something profound in both of them. Claire took a seat across from him, placing her hands lightly on the tray. "I feel better today," she said, her voice calm but carrying a note of gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for being there yesterday. It meant More than I can say. Alex shook his head, setting down his coffee cup. You don't have to thank me. I was happy to be here for you, always. There was a pause, a shared silence that felt comfortable. Like two old friends sitting together who finally understood each other in a new way. Both knew the feelings they carried, but now those feelings existed openly, without fear or hesitation. There was no need to rush, no need to force anything. The acknowledgement itself was a gift, a moment of clarity that would shape the days to come. Alex, Claire began softly, I've been thinking about everything, about the past and about us. And I realized something important. He leaned forward slightly, attentive. I've always admired you, she continued, her voice steady now, carrying a quiet warmth. Not just because of what you do or how responsible you are, but because of who you are. The way you care for people, the way you notice what matters. I've always respected it, and I've always felt close to you. Alex's chest tightened, but he smiled gently. I felt the same. For a long time, maybe more than I realized. Claire reached out, placing her hand lightly on the blanket that rested between them. The gesture was tender, a symbol of connection, trust, and affection. I think that's the key, she said. We've always cared for each other, even in ways that were quiet and unspoken. And now, we just need to keep being honest with each other. Alex nodded, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. It wasn't a dramatic declaration of love or a sudden revelation. It was something steadier, more enduring, a promise built on years of shared experience, trust, and quiet understanding. They spent the morning together, talking about small things, plans for the week, favorite memories, and hopes for the future. But beneath the casual conversation was a current of deep emotional connection, a bond that had grown stronger through care, patience, and honesty. Every glance, every shared smile carried the weight of unspoken feelings finally acknowledged. By afternoon, the storm that had washed through the night had cleared, leaving the world outside fresh and glistening. The house felt warm, inviting, and full of life. Alex and Claire moved around the space with a natural ease, their interactions light but meaningful. It was clear that something had changed, not in grand, dramatic ways, but in the steady rhythm of everyday life as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Alex stood by the window, watching the colors shift from gold to soft pink. Claire joined him, standing quietly at his side. For a long moment, they simply watched together. A silence comfortable and full of unspoken understanding. Alex, Claire said softly, whatever comes next, I want us to face it together. We've built something real, something worth being careful with. Alex smiled, reaching out to lightly touch her hand. IAGR.